Somewhere in the world today, a passenger jet is going to take off with nobody on board. No passengers, no cargo, no drinks trolley. Just two pilots, a nearly empty fuel load, and a one-way flight plan to a patch of desert. That aeroplane has carried millions of people, flown far enough to reach the moon and back dozens of times over, and this morning, it is flying to a place it will never leave. So here's the question. What actually happens to a plane when it's retired? Because it turns out the answer is not a scrapyard. It's an industry. Right now, industry estimates put roughly 8,000 end-of-life aircraft sitting in deserts, fields, and storage yards around the world, with thousands more expected over the next decade. From the air, some of these sites look like car parks for giants. Hundreds of aircraft lined up nose to tail, wings almost touching, tails fading in the sun. It looks like abandonment. It is very nearly the opposite. Every single one of those aircraft is being carefully, deliberately taken apart for money, and around 90% of it will end up back in use. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to walk you through the whole process. Why a perfectly working airplane gets retired in the first place. Why it has to be the desert specifically. What gets stripped off, in what order, and which single component is worth more than the rest of the aircraft combined. And what's actually left at the very end. Let's get into it. Here's the first surprise. Retired airliners are usually not broken. Aircraft aren't like cars. They're built to be repaired essentially forever, and components get replaced on strict schedules long before they fail. Most commercial jets are retired somewhere in the region of 20 to 30 years old, but that number isn't a mechanical deadline. Aircraft aren't measured in years so much as in flight hours and pressurization cycles. The number of times the fuselage has been pumped up and let down again. And the reason they stop flying is almost never that they can't. It's that they shouldn't. What kills an airplane is arithmetic. Every few years, a jet goes in for its heaviest overhaul. The industry calls the deepest one a D-check, where it's very nearly taken apart and put back together. It costs an enormous amount and takes the aircraft out of service for weeks. So the owner sits down and does a sum. What will it cost to keep this thing flying versus what a newer, more fuel-efficient aircraft would burn instead? And at some point, the newer jet wins. The old aircraft is still perfectly airworthy. It's just become the more expensive way to move the same people. So the aircraft is scheduled for its final journey, and it's a strange one. It flies almost empty to keep it light, often with a skeleton crew, and it's the only flight in that airplane's life with no commercial purpose whatsoever. When it lands, it gets taken off the National Aircraft Register. Legally, it stops being a registered aircraft. Its onboard computers and logs are wiped, and then someone tows it off the taxiway onto hard desert ground and parks it in a row with hundreds of others. Now, why the desert? It's not for the view. There are 3 reasons, and every one of them is gloriously practical. First, humidity is what corrodes aluminium, and dry desert air barely has any, so a parked aircraft rusts far more slowly there than it would almost anywhere else. Second, the ground. In places like Arizona, the soil is alkaline and hard enough that you can tow a fully assembled airliner onto bare earth and park it without it sinking and without paving anything. And third, the least romantic reason of all. In the desert, land is cheap, and these aircraft need an enormous amount of it. Quick question. Why are aircraft boneyards almost always in deserts? Comment your answer, then keep watching, because what they do to the planes next is genuinely strange. If an aircraft is being stored rather than immediately scrapped, it gets what's affectionately called mothballing, and the results look faintly ridiculous. Engine intakes, windows, and every other opening get sealed, often with a flexible latex-based coating that peels off cleanly later. The outer layer is deliberately white because white reflects sunlight, and without it, the inside of a sealed aircraft parked in desert sun can climb to genuinely destructive temperatures. And the seals aren't just about heat. They're keeping out sand, dust, and the birds, insects, and small animals that would otherwise find a dark, sheltered engine nacelle an excellent place to build a home. And here's something most people assume wrong. Parking an aircraft in a desert is not free, and it isn't passive. Stored aircraft on programs meant to keep them flyable still get inspections, record-keeping, and scheduled maintenance, and reported storage figures for large jets have run into the tens of thousands of dollars per year, which means somebody is doing the same arithmetic all over again every single year. Is this aircraft still worth keeping whole? The moment that answer turns to no, it stops being an aeroplane in waiting and becomes a shopping list. Because here's the part I love. Not all of these aircraft are dead. Some are just asleep. When demand for flights suddenly jumps or new aircraft deliveries run late, airlines go back to the desert and wake some of them up, and that takes real work. Bringing a stored jet back into service is reported to take something in the region of 40 working hours for a smaller narrow body and around 100 for a wide body, and considerably more if it's been sitting a long time. Peel the white coating off, unseal the engines, run the checks, and an aircraft that had been parked in a desert for years flies passengers again. But for most of them, the decision goes the other way, and the aircraft gets what the industry calls a part out. This is not smashing. It is a careful, sequenced disassembly done to published best practice standards, and it typically takes somewhere in the region of 1 to 2 months to work through a single aircraft. The valuable components come off in a deliberate order, each one tagged with its paperwork as it goes. And the whole thing runs on a simple principle that flips how you probably think about aeroplanes. This is no longer one aircraft. It's a few thousand individually valuable parts that happen to be arranged in the shape of an aircraft. And the single most valuable thing on the aircraft is not the aircraft. It's the engines. A used turbofan can carry a value in the region of a couple of $1 million, and engine teardown alone is commonly said to account for something like 40% of everything recovered from the whole aeroplane. The reason is that engines are full of certified, life-limited rotating parts that operators have to replace on schedule anyway. So a good second-hand one is a genuinely attractive buy, often at a large discount to a new unit, which produces a sentence that sounds absurd but is completely routine. Quite often, the two engines are worth more than the aircraft they were bolted to. Quick question, and it's the one that surprises people most. What is usually the single most valuable component recovered from a retired airliner? Drop your answer below. After the engines, the list keeps going, and it is longer than you'd expect. The auxiliary power unit, the landing gear, a set for a large jet, is a serious asset on its own. Avionics and cockpit displays, the flight entertainment systems, the galleys, the ovens, the trolleys, and yes, the seats. A single aircraft typically yields something in the order of a couple of thousand recoverable parts, and there's a whole secondary market for them because for an airline flying an older fleet, it is usually far cheaper to buy a good used component than a brand new one. There's even a small enthusiast market. People genuinely buy retired cabin trolleys and seats for their homes. And here's the detail that quietly runs this entire industry. A used aircraft component is only worth something if it can prove what it is. Every recovered part carries its own documented history, where it came from, how many hours it has done, what's been done to it. Strip that paperwork away, and a perfectly good, perfectly safe engine part becomes, commercially, a lump of very expensive metal because nobody can legally fit it to a flying aircraft. So the teams doing the disassembly aren't really harvesting metal. They're harvesting metal plus its documentation, and the documentation is what makes it valuable. Eventually, there's nothing valuable left to unbolt, and what remains is a hollow aluminum shell. That gets cut apart and crushed, and the metal goes back into the supply chain to be melted down and becomes something else entirely. Construction material, packaging, parts for industries with nothing to do with aviation. Industry bodies commonly put the total recovery figure at somewhere around 85 to 90% of the aircraft by weight, and some modern facilities claim higher, so the airplane doesn't really end, it gets redistributed. Some of it is still flying on other aircraft, and some of it is probably sitting on a shelf in a shop near you, and a few escape the process entirely. Plenty of retired passenger jets get converted into freighters, seats out, big cargo door in, and the aircraft carries boxes for another decade or more. Others go to museums or to training grounds where emergency crews practice on a real airframe. Some end up as film sets, and a small, strange handful get turned into things that are not aircraft at all. Cafes, hotel rooms, even houses, with the fuselage becoming the wall of somebody's living room. It's an odd fate for a machine designed to spend its life at 35,000 feet, but it's a genuinely long retirement. Quick question. Roughly how much of a retired airliner ends up recycled or reused rather than thrown away? Comment your guess. The real number surprised me. Here's what I keep thinking about with this one. We look at a jet and see a single object. One aeroplane, one thing, with a beginning and an end. The industry doesn't see that at all. It sees a bundle of individually valuable, individually documented components that were temporarily arranged into the shape of an aircraft. And retirement is simply the moment that arrangement stops being the most profitable one. Nothing dramatic happens. No one throws it away. It just gets unbundled, and the pieces go and be useful somewhere else, which is, when you think about it, a much better ending than a scrapyard. So, a retired airliner isn't scrapped. It's unbundled, mothballed in dry desert air, stripped in a careful order with the engines as the real prize, and around 90% of it goes back into use. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and tell me in the comments which part surprised you most. And subscribe, because this is the first of a series where every week I answer one of these questions properly. Next week, what actually happens to a parcel you send back? Because the answer is almost never, it goes back on the shelf. I'll see you there.